You're listening to Street Side, a Street Medicine Institute podcast.
Hello and welcome to Streetside, conversations at the intersection of healthcare, homelessness, and humanity. I'm your host, Michael Brennan, and it brings me great joy to introduce our guest today, Dr. Sam Jackson. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, so Sam is a street psychiatrist in Chicago. Is it fair to say you were the first street psychiatrist in Chicago?
Well, not to jump immediately into the weeds, but what is a street psychiatrist? There are people who've been doing this work in shelters, and there's so many amazing outreach people. But as far as I know, the first full-time street psychiatrist who really does majority or a lot of work to encampments and train stations and boots on the pavement. Yes, I think that's true.
Okay.
That's what I tell people.
Okay. We're going to give you that moniker. You are the first street psychiatrist in Chicago. But Sam, delightful to meet you. And I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit of your story, your own personal journey into medicine and into psychiatry and onto the streets. How'd you get to where you are?
Yeah, thank you. It has been a personal journey, one that in hindsight, there's this clear narrative and motivation, but wasn't really as clear. I was going through it. But I'll tell you the version I tell most people, which is one that I came to realize more so at the end of residency, which is in the back of my mind, I was motivated to connect with people experiencing homelessness because my uncle was homeless for many years, had schizophrenia, and stayed in and out of shelters, hopping on trains and going around buses between mostly New York, Denver, and stopping some places in between that path, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and others. He had a rough, brutal life, as most of the people do who live outside with serious mental illness. And one of the things that he experienced was being shot by police during a behavioral health crisis. And part of that, clearly that he wasn't connected to meaningful services. He started volunteering at homeless shelters and in college and afterwards. And then, like many in the street medicine world, I heard a lecture from Jim Withers in medical school. He came to Central Michigan, which is remarkable. That man has been to almost every university, I think, and training program. And it blew me away. It stopped me in my tracks. My heart was racing. I wanted to get involved as much as possible. And I got lucky because there was still an opening or there was a cancellation, and I could do a rotation with him in Pittsburgh with Operation Safety Net for a month at the end of third year. I had my application ready to be an OBGYN. I didn't frankly like psychiatry that much, but the month I spent on the streets in Pittsburgh was so thrilling. And the conversation I had with him so inspiring. Not that he's a psychiatrist, but I just started noticing the impact of mental health and serious mental illness. It started to click a bit more that I was drawn to that group, like my uncle, as well as those really in the throes of addiction, helping assist someone to inject in their back during a medical student rotation in Pittsburgh is really going to leave an impression. And when I came back to Central Michigan, where I went to medical school, I thought, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I can do psychiatry, and maybe street psychiatry is a thing. For the rest of fourth year, I spent most of that year setting up street medicine at Central Michigan University, which still exists, and proud of that. They do amazing work. And then Jim Withers started connecting me with others and give me some advice. There's a psychiatrist at Yale, Emma Lowe. She's amazing. She's one of our own, and you should go hang out with her if you can. So I set up a rotation out at Yale. I did some addiction work, but I mostly was with her as much as possible. And it was like, okay, well, this is incredible, thrilling. And then they told me, in New York, there's this place called Janian, a group called Janian that someone said, Jim or Emma, they do like the gold standard of street psychiatry. And that just stuck in my mind. I also love New York and Brooklyn. So I applied and was blessed to match in a program there. And as soon as I could, I connected with them and realized that this whole street psychiatry thing was not something I was inventing. There have been people, not a ton, but there are people who have been doing this for decades, including some people at Janian. And so, to make a long story just a little bit longer, I was, again, really privileged to work during my public psychiatry fellowship here at Columbia with Janian, even a little bit during residency in safe havens, a tiny bit of outreach, supportive housing, and just learn about how a well set up program that's been around for over 30 or 40 years, really expanded in the last decade, can provide the full continuum of services from street work, shelter work, because that's the majority of where people experiencing homelessness are in New York, to supportive housing, these intensive mobile treatment teams, and what an organization looks like that does a really good job doing that too. Because I was interested in the clinical work, but I'm also interested in setting that up in Chicago. My plan to stay at Janian and be a satisfied lifelong Janie employee, like most are, was cut short because I married my wife and, would do anything for her. And she's like, well, I'm going back to Chicago. That's where I live. And that's where my family is. So I'm like, okay, well, 100%, that's me in a heartbeat. I'm there. Yeah. What's Chicago got going on? And they do have a lot going on. I don't want to paint the picture that Chicago is this barren place without outreach. They have one of the most rich outreach histories in all of the United States, in my opinion. The first Narcan administered anywhere in the world was by the Chicago Recovery Alliance on the West Side. And there's been cool medicine people doing outreach for a while, but like psychiatry typically is, we're behind the times. We kind of should be there, but aren't for various reasons. And when I started saying, hey, I'm a street psychiatrist, this is what I want to do, I want to join any outreach team, most people, almost everyone, was like, we have been waiting for you for decades. Arms wide open, join our team, let's figure this out. And it's just sort of grown from there.
Fantastic. Tell us more about that. Now, what's your day? What's your week look like? What are you involved in? What's going on in Chicago?
So it is changing. I will say that come September, there's a brand new grant that we got. And so it's really going to expand my time. I'm going to say it as if it's September because that's what it's going to be like for hopefully years to come, which is there's two different buckets that I put street psychiatry work into that I do, and I think most people do, which is one, you go to the people and you just sort of set up shop. You go to the encampments, you get to know people there. In Chicago, the majority of people staying outside are actually on the CTA, on our transit, our trains, our L, on two specific lines generally, the blue line and red line, because those are the ones that run 24/7. And we're a cold city. People do sleep outside remarkably throughout the winter, but at least 25 and probably many more people die being frozen to death each year, which is horribly tragic. So part of my work is going to the CTA Blue Line, setting up with a couple other nonprofits, one that provides food, one that provides needle exchange, harm reduction services, case management, and then Loyola Street Medicine, where I do street psych with them. It's beautiful, chaotic, loving, kind of dangerous at times, or at least have to be on your toes experience. It's in the evenings, about 250 to 300 people go through the train station in a couple hours. I love it. I can't sleep when I get home because it's just so much fun and so much on my mind. And the people's stories are rattling through my mind. I'm just slinging Suboxone and giving out some antipsychotics, and we're building up capacity there because it's about doing it for about 6 months or a year almost.
Can I interrupt? Do you have those on hand, or are you prescribing those?
Both. We have some tackle boxes filled with meds that we get donated or buy at super cheap for people who, this gets into a little bit of how you prescribe and how you make a decision to give meds. But when you do an assessment, in street medicine, especially in these types of environments, you have to be pretty brief with it. Liz Fry, who you've had on the show before, developed the rapid street mental health assessment, rapid street psychiatry assessment, one of those two. Apologies, Liz, for not remembering the exact thing, but it helps you think about the algorithm, what you can rule in, rule out to just get the class of meds and treat symptoms. Most people that I see, perhaps counter to what I was thinking, are pretty excited that there's a psychiatrist there who understands their world a bit, and they're relatively knowledgeable about what meds they have and haven't taken, what ones they hate. But Abilify actually really helps me, or Seroquel. I would really appreciate. So if they know these types of things, I feel confident they're not going to have a reaction to it. The benefits of helping them and bring down the symptoms, which ideally helps them then get off the street and engage better maybe with the housing supports, outweighs the risk of the potential side effects, which there are. Yeah, I will either give them a week or two supply out of our tackle box. I usually follow it up with a prescription because most of our patients also do have insurance. They have Medicaid, and we have some people helping enroll people in Medicaid as well at those events. And then it kind of ties into, I'm happy to talk more about that specific work, but I also have some of my time at these indoor but drop-in center locations, which are amazing. There's one in particular called Revive. So I usually tell people if I'm seeing them out in an encampment or in a CTA Blue Line, like, come to Revive. You'd be an amazing member of the community. We have even more services there that we can offer. Food. There's, we can get their mail there. There's computers. There's chill spaces, games. And they become a member of the community in the same way I am. We look out for each other. You feel seen by each other. You're not judged. And you're responsible for the place, the safety of it. And I think that people help when you're a little bit more on a level playing field in that way in those types of spaces. And it's a little bit easier also for me to frankly have a bigger tackle box of meds to store, give LAIs. There are a few hubs like that in Chicago that I work at, another place, the West Side Field Station. And then there's a couple other teams through those locations that do outreach. I don't go with them every day, but I have a resident who often goes. And if there's a more serious or complicated case, we discuss it and then I go with them as needed. We found that that's just at this point, a better use of my time to be at these hubs and then have students that I supervise go. And then I go, as needed for the outreach encampment type of work.
Great. Thank you for all that.
Yeah. And then there's actually one other thing.
Okay. What else? You're a busy man.
It's the second bucket. And I'm sorry, I'm maybe draining on a little bit.
Oh,
but
I thought Revive was the second bucket. That's part of the first bucket.
I would put the first bucket is you kind of set up shop and hope people come to you.
Okay.
Whether it's a Blue Line or a drop-in center. But there are people who do that. A lot of people, probably the majority of people actually, have some motivation to either go to these locations where they're already going to get services or go a little bit out of their way to the drop-in center. But there are going to be people that fall through the cracks of the crack who don't really engage too much in any of these places, who are so in and out of hospitals and jails that they need to be more absurdly engaged. And so we have a grant through Rush and UIC to create a small caseload. If your listeners are familiar with ACT teams, the tagline is sort of an ACT on steroid. They're like even lower caseloads, 25. It's based on models from LA Home Team and New York's IMT teams. And it's for people who cycle through these systems without getting any meaningful care. We're setting it up right now. So I'm very excited to be talking about it with you and then to be implementing it starting this summer and fully this fall. But it's that second bucket of people who fall through the cracks of the cracks where we are going to assertively go see them and track them down day to day, week by week. Yeah.
Okay. So that's more on foot with a backpack.
That's more on foot with a backpack. It also can include going to the jail to see them or following them into the hospital. It's seeing them wherever they are and pop up to try to coordinate their care, and even continuing to follow them once we get them into housing to ensure that they stay into housing. Because a lot of these folks get into housing and then they've lost their community from the street. They're now using alone, higher risk. They don't know how to live indoors because they haven't either for decades or maybe ever really in their life, and they're institutionalized maybe to some extent, and so helping them make that adjustment and make it stick is part of the work as well. So I think we're going to go wherever the people need us to go.
Gosh, that's big. That's labor intensive, but a huge benefit to your patients. To the way you talked about following them to jail, hospital, housing. That's what's needed, right? That's what we should all be doing. When our patients don't have phones, it makes it hard to find them. I end up driving around. Walking under bridges, looking for folks. It's challenging. That's time consuming. So kudos to you for getting that going.
Thanks.
You dropped LAI. You just kind of said LAI. We have a lay audience that might not know what a LAI is. So, I want to pause and just talk about the LAIs for a minute. Long-acting injectable antipsychotics, I'm assuming is what you're referring to. Can you tell us about those? What are they? When do you use them? How effective are they? And are they a good fit for this population?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for pausing. Yes. Long-acting injectable medications. There are versions that are for addiction-related medications. One in particular, probably the most common medication that I prescribe is called Suboxone. but there's a long-acting injectable version, two of them called Brixadi and Sublocade, that each last a month. And that's probably commonly prescribed by street medicine folks along with street psychiatrists. The LAIs, the long-acting injectables, also come in an antipsychotic version. The antipsychotics are used to treat schizophrenia, which is when people have psychosis, delusions, and hallucinations, as well as a bipolar disorder. So they can help stabilize people's moods. Some people also have a combination of those two called schizoaffective, where they both have psychosis and have manic mood episodes. The other thing is the diagnosis can be so unclear with some people who use substances, have so much trauma, and over time we try to resolve and zero in on a diagnosis, but they have mood symptoms that sometimes we treat with second generation antipsychotics as well. So what's the benefit of using a long-acting injectable when they come in a pill form? If you imagine being homeless yourself, if there's medication that you have to hold on to take every day, there's a risk you may lose it. There's a risk it's stolen, because if someone's seeking a medication like Xanax or something, they may just grab whatever pill bottle you have. They're not going to be all the times differentiate it. And there are some medications that require refrigeration, or not so much the pills that I'm talking about, but the benefits, particularly for this population then, is you don't have to worry about carrying something like that around, keeping it safely stored. Or if you lose it or run out of it, like, where the heck am I going to get that refill? Insurance won't even cover it. I can't pay for an early one. What are we going to do? So the long-acting injectables allow for more flexibility to get it once a month, or for some of them antipsychotic medications, there's a new one cleverly called Hafira, which is up to 6 months long of an antipsychotic. You have to kind of work your way up to that. Street psychiatrists are known to be very quick to go to a long-acting injectable. If you can show tolerance or have a history of tolerating a pill version of a medication, this is a little bit contrasting to the norms of psychiatry, we will just start someone on an injectable medication. It's after a conversation where the person consents to it, and we talk about, very similar to the conversation we're having right now, the benefits of going on an injectable. But we find it's a little bit easier for people to get the benefits of it. We can store oftentimes the injectables for them and bring it to wherever they are. So yes, we use a lot of long-acting injectables when possible.
Name a few. I've used a lot of Invega, but I haven't used Abilify forms, and I'm just wondering which ones are your go-tos. What are you using the most of?
The go-tos are the two you just said, risperidone and Abilify. And I'd say maybe Abilify has the edge if I'm just polling and the conversations I've had with different street psychiatrists. It's street psychiatry, maybe 201 here is to be thinking about these types of things. And the benefits of doing those, the reason why they're more readily used, is for a few reasons. One, you can give them both, and without much oral overlap, they can be on the LAI pretty much straight away. So contrasting it to, for example, old school haloperidol, which is really helpful for some people. Technically, you're supposed to have a 3-month oral overlap when you're giving someone haldol decanoate and they need to be on the pills. If you give someone Aristada, and this is why I think it has a slight edge over Invega. Pause me, by the way, Michael, if I'm getting a little bit too in the weeds here. Okay.
That's right. That's right.
You can give Aristada Initio, which is like a one-time booster when you're getting someone on an injection, and Aristada, the maintenance dose, generally 1064, which is the dose you can give every 2 months. You can give them both on the same day. That person walks out and doesn't need another medication for 2 months. And there's good evidence that it'll have some stability for either mood, bipolar, or psychotic symptoms. Invega Sustenna is used, but technically you're supposed to give an initial dose, and then the soonest is 4 days later, give a second one. Moving forward, that person can just get monthly. Once they show 3 months of tolerability, insurance companies, at least in Illinois, will then pay for Trinza, which is an every 3-month version. You show that that's good for 2 months, and then you can go to half a euro. Those paths are somewhat similar, and the benefits being you can just start it on someone right away.
We did our clinical deep dive for the clinicians on listening, but for the lay
Yes.
audience, we're gonna come back to some larger themes.
Perfect.
I wanna ask you, as a street psychiatrist in Chicago,
Yes.
and me doing primary care street medicine for the last 4 years, this country went through deinstitutionalization in the in the 70s. And when you think back, we used to have these places called insane asylums. It was really pejorative and, we just stigmatizing and as could be. And it was like jail, right? And we deinstitutionalized, we put people out in the community. In all fairness, we have some very severely mentally ill people on the streets. Like I have a patient that had 34 mental hygiene transports last year before we got her on the long acting Invega, right? Now she's had 0, right?
Amazing.
Winner, but there's some severe mental illness out there. What's your vision when it comes to patient autonomy and agency versus safety and management? What would you put forth as kind of like your guiding principles or philosophy around treating severe mental illness on the streets?
Yeah, good question. And I want to also talk about a little bit of your buildup in the framing of the question, because deinstitutionalization plays some role. I do think, though, there are other narratives that complicate but maybe create a more accurate understanding of people with serious mental illness who are out on the streets now. If you looked at when deinstitutionalization took place and when people were like released from the hospitals, it was mostly white women actually who were institutionalized at that time. If you look at the population now that exists, it's very different. It's mostly Black men. So it's not a one-to-one, someone was released from a state hospital in the 50s or 60s and now they're homeless, or they're whatever, kids are homeless, or the people who would have gone to the hospital back then are now on the streets. That may play some role, and the lack of mental health funding plays a role. But why are Black men in particular out on the streets? There's also a horrible history of racist incarceration, particularly that community of Black individuals, Black men, that devastated not just those individuals, but their families and communities. There's some communities where 50% of people, I think in DC during the 90s, were incarcerated if you were a young Black man. And so that contributes greatly to experiencing homelessness. The other thing that I would add that's different than the deinstitutionalization narrative, but important, is the housing crisis. And you see this as the primary driver of homelessness nowadays, not a lack of mental health resources. So I'm eventually going to zero in on your question. Sorry, but I think it's helpful.
You're good. I think this is important.
Because most people who are out there who are homeless don't have a mental illness, and they're in this situation because of medical debt, because they lost their job and they couldn't have any savings, because rent is so damn high, and that their disability doesn't even cover rent in a studio. So they're on the street cycling in and out and don't necessarily need mental health services. If that group of people are struggling and experiencing homelessness, the people who have serious mental illness stand no chance, but they're going to be one of the first people who are going to struggle, be in it longest, and have most difficulty getting out. So tackling pie in the sky, big issues, there has to be more housing. There has to be more affordable housing. And for the general population that works, there are those with serious mental illness. The person that you talked about who received the LAI and had sounds like a huge improvement. Clearly, treatment alongside housing supports is the ideal for that person. And so I think part of the role of doing this work, yes, is to help people, but the goal is not to create the most mentally healthy homeless population. It's to help end homelessness. And by providing treatment along the continuum while they're in housing as well, creates that ideal for those who are most vulnerable.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
You hit it all. You hit the structural racism. You hit that homelessness is a housing problem, and housing first initiatives, and which I'm glad you brought us back to that. I often think of what we're struggling with on the streets. In medicine, we talk about multi-system failure. When people's organ systems start shutting down. We've got multi-system failure in this nation.
I love that.
We, just any system you look at, is not helping our people. It's not working. Education, criminal justice, healthcare. It's pretty much a mess. Yeah. Would you agree with multi-system failure of?
I love that. And you've given me a couple phrases I'm going to steal from you. That's a good one.
Good. I want to ask you, you help coordinate street psychiatry nationally and internationally. Tell us about that.
Yes. And importantly, we're trying to go beyond just psychiatrists because we tend to be a little bit
Oh, mental health.
mental health. Yes. We tend to be a little bit full of ourselves. So we organize, and this is something I'm trying to push internally almost more than anything. I started the Street Mental Health Coalition, I think a year and a half or 2 years ago now, which has grown to almost 250 people, mostly within the US, but also from Canada, England, Australia, Kenya, and various different places around the world. About half of those 250, so 100 or more, are street mental health professionals, people who are doing this job day in, day out, and the other half are interested trainees, both wonderful. And we meet once a month. Any listener here who's doing this work, intrigued by it, wants to get involved, I welcome you to join. Contact me. I think my contact information will be in the show notes, and we'll add you to the listserv. We meet the first Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern over Zoom. Every other month, we have a group like Emma Lowe from Yale or the LA Home Team or the New York Janian folks present on what they do. So people can get an idea of what an established program looks like in a big city or a smaller area like New Haven. And then the in-between times, we have general discussion where people can bring up their questions and concerns. I'm new to this work. What meds do I bring out on the street? And how do I get labs to make sure I'm doing this work at the highest quality like my patients deserve? So it's meant to be a group that spreads the word about what works, encourages people to get into it, and provide mentorship and support for those kind of just starting off.
Great, thank you. Can you provide what's the access point for that? Is there a website or your email, or what are people signing up for that group?
The best way is to contact me. My email, I can say it now, and then also if you can include
in
in
the show notes. Yeah.
The best is actually my Gmail, samuel.wesley.jackson@gmail.com. And then the other thing to include in the show notes is a website that we do have, because this group, and I really have to give credit to the students like Ben Gorman for leading the charge on this, is a street mental health conference happening in 2027.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And so the website gives more information on our group and the conference, and that is streetmentalhealth.org.
Streetmentalhealth.org. Okay,
Yep.
Great. I'll get those in the show notes. I want to ask you as well, with the time we have, you're writing a book. Tell us about your book.
Oh my gosh, this book. Yes, I think like anyone who's written a book, I'm in the throes of it. And it's
oh my gosh, and you had a baby.
And I love it.
A baby and a book.
Yeah. Right. So my colleague, who is incredible, Enrico Castillo, he is a critic advocate of this work, which is super important to have. And him and I are the lead editors for a book that's right now titled Homelessness, which is a street mental health guide to serving people along the entire continuum in any setting. So the structure of it is, you're in an emergency room or you're an emergency room provider. Let's pull out that chapter and see what are the tenets of providing good care to those who come into the emergency room. Inpatient unit, street outreach, mobile crisis, medical respite, and then there's a subsection of specialty populations that deserve their own attention, like children experiencing homelessness, women. And so, yes, this book, which I eventually be, I think, super proud of it. I'm joking a little bit. It's an incredible project because we have over 50 people contributing various disciplines. There's a person with lived experience on every chapter. There are lawyers, mental health court administrators, nurses, nurse practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, everyone in between. And we anticipate the book will be out sometime in 2027.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. So the end is in sight.
It's in sight, yes.
Yeah, that's great. Sam, what question haven't I asked?
I think one thing that rattles around in my mind, I don't pretend to have the answer to, but I'd like to give you two patient stories about how I think about it, which is like, what is success for street psychiatry? There's an individual who's young, who I adore. Seriously look forward to seeing him every single week. I'll say he's Andre. That's not his real name, but he was staying outside, has a very severe form of schizophrenia, treatment resistant, and is plagued by hearing voices, persecute him, and he's very disorganized as well, especially when he's not doing good. And prior to him connecting with our team, he was in and out of the hospital 3 or 4 times for 2 or 4 weeks at a time. He did get connected to our team. He got on treatment. I think also, even maybe importantly, he got connected to a community at Revive, got connected to housing supports. And to his credit, really stuck in that community, became a vibrant member of that community, would join every group that was there. There's a pain management group. And so people would be in a circle and they'd go around and explain their pain. And they'd say, "Oh, Andre, like, where's your pain?" He's, "Oh, no, I don't have pain. I just like being here."
Love
And
that.
last spring, I had the pleasure, along with our team, to giving him keys to his apartment. And so now he's housed. He continues to come back. It's not been a smooth process. We moved him to clozapine because that's how sick he is, how much he's still plagued. I think just as of this week, the level of clozapine is not really helping him, but he's got some now medical issues that we need to work on. But that's maybe a classic feel-good story, because someone went from the street with mental illness, getting treatment and housing, and that's what we want for everyone. There's also a success, though, with a story that someone I met last year through, I didn't mention this, but I work a tiny bit of my time at a medical respite, and I provide as needed care for that. This woman had come to the hospital because she was staying literally on the sidewalk and had stage 4 breast cancer, a wound open on her chest, weeping out into the streets. And it was getting like dangerously cold. So she was treated and stabilized to the extent possible, and then brought to our medical respite, where we talked to her about options. And she frankly didn't really want any more treatment to be done. What she did want, though, is to make it long enough to make it to her granddaughter's birthday, to get reconnected with them, to still use crack cocaine on occasion, and to be in a comfortable bed and to be without some pain. So it was complicated, given her substance use, to get her on the pain management that was needed. It was a little complicated to get her reconnected to family, but she spent that birthday with her grandkid. And when she died, we helped provide a funeral where her family could all attend and lay her in rest in peace. She didn't die weeping with an open sore in the streets. She died with dignity. And that, I think, is a success as well.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And good for this work.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sam, I'm impressed with you. I'm just going to be honest with you for a second.
Thanks,
You're very well spoken, but you're also very positive, upbeat, and the audience can't see it, but you've been smiling the whole time, and you seem to love what you do.
I do.
And I want you to speak into that. What do you love about the work that you do?
Well, I think it allows me to treat people like my uncle. I relate deeply to the people that I work with. I think because of that, it feels like my brothers and sisters and uncles, in a way that they look after me. I had a baby, you mentioned, and some of them have got me presents when I came back. Almost everyone who I've told or knows about it is thrilled and wants to see pictures. So I feel supported by them in a way that I feel privileged to give them the support. I inherited this familial trauma, and my grandparents to my parents and aunt and uncles, there wasn't really much that they could do. And they literally handed me and my grandma like a pamphlet of all the newspaper clippings of all the bullshit that went on, and like, just read about this, do something about this. And I don't consciously think about this, but I think some part of me feels amazing that I actually can do something a little bit. And if that even just means inspiring more people to come do this work, that's hugely successful to me. It makes me feel great. So something about that feels, probably having amazing parents and a wonderful wife and a beautiful, healthy baby and all that makes me smiley too.
That's great. That's great. Do you get to mentor trainees, or is that part of your role?
I do a lot. I am formally with Loyola, UIC, and Rush. So there are like actual rotations that people, especially the residents and addiction fellows, can come with me and work with me for. I try to not do 1 month rotations when possible, because I really want them to get a longitudinal experience. So like 6 months if possible, a full year, sometimes 3 months. But I also have a lot of med students and pre-med students. I'm trying to work it out so that we can do away rotations like I did with Jim Withers. That kind of got me stoked about all this work to begin with. And yeah, I mean, I'm following in the footsteps of the giants like Jim and Jen O'Connell and MLO. So yes, I always have 2, 3, 4 trainees with me wherever I am.
Oh, that's good. That's going to keep the movement moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we talked before we started recording, you and I talked about this work being gritty but gratifying.
Gritty but gratifying.
Gritty but gratifying. And all that you've said just underscores that for me. So we're coming down to the wire, and we ask all our guests to answer the following question. If you could do one thing to make the world a better place, what would it be?
Wow. Good question.
Big question.
Big question. Yes.
Yeah.
This is tough, Michael. I'm torn between thinking so big that it almost sounds cliche and then being so specific that it's like, why didn't you go more boldly?
You know what? We're gonna break the rules. You get to give two answers.
Oh, amazing. You're the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go big and go macro and micro.
Yeah. I think something that pulls on my heartstrings is that people freeze to death and that they have frostbite. I mean, just living in Chicago, growing up in northern Michigan, I think healthcare should be a human right, but I think housing should just be a human right, that there should at least be shelters, if not housing available with supports for everyone. So that's big pie in the sky. I don't think it's impossible, though. The veterans have largely decreased homelessness by 60 or 80%, and there's been major investments in order to make that happen. I think there are policy changes that can actually do that. And then very specifically, so many of my patients deserve or are on, or I'm working my butt off with lawyers to get them on disability. But when they get on disability, they still almost can't afford housing. And so I really would like disability to be easier to get and have it be a livable amount. I think that would make a huge difference for my population of people, my people that I love, to be able to be in housing and to stay in housing.
Great. So it kind of all spirals around the housing piece, which it is a travesty of all that is good about humanity, that the rising numbers of homelessness in our country. I mean, it's an abomination.
Yeah,
I just spent time in California, and in one of the richest countries on the planet, it should not be this way.
One of the richest states in the United States, and then you have Skid Row, and it is. I agree.
It's an absurdity.
Yeah.
So we can agree on that. Okay, Sam, it's been delightful to talk to you. Wish you well with the baby and the book.
Thank you.
And with your work. Thank you for being on Streetside. And I will share your contact information in the show notes, and hopefully people will reach out.
The Street Medicine Institute is a secular, nonpartisan organization. Any spiritual or political views shared by guests on Streetside are their own. They're offered in the spirit of conversation and should not be taken as reflecting the views or positions of the Street Medicine Institute. This podcast should not be used for personal medical guidance. Please consult your healthcare provider.